Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., an alternative parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Today, friends, we have another exciting guest on our podcast. His name is Bob Drach, and he is running with the Libertarian Party for North Carolina State Auditor. So welcome to the podcast, Bob.
Hey, thank you, Andrew. Pleased to be here.
We're glad to have you. If you could get started by you kindly giving us an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
Yeah, happy to. I'm a certified management accountant, and I've got a background in business, in finance and business. I've graduated the MBA program at Stanford University.
Wow.
And interestingly enough, I've been a Peace Corps volunteer. So not too many people cover that broad of a spectrum.
Yes.
But early in my life, I registered for the draft, like a lot of people, and I thought hard about customers about my service as a citizen and what my responsibilities were. And I guess if I had been drafted, I would have gone to serve. But I decided to do two things. I decided to join the Peace Corps, be a Peace Corps volunteer, and work a couple years in the name of peace. And then I registered as a Libertarian. That was back in, 1980 or something like that. So I registered Libertarian, and I've always held those principles pretty high, in high esteem, and I've tried to live my life by those principles. I've gotten to a point in my life where I've run some successful businesses, and my family has grown up, and I'm in a position to serve again. And I think as a state auditor, it would take good use of my skills and experience and benefit the citizens of North Carolina.
Sure, wow. That's a lot of interesting stuff. So it sounds like you became a libertarian before libertarianism was cool.
Yeah, and it's extremely cool, right?
Yeah. So I'm interested in, because you mentioned the Peace Corps, and the Peace Corps is, how do you feel about that from a libertarian perspective? Do you think that would be a libertarian program, or how would you view that from a libertarian perspective?
Great question. And, there are a lot of international aid agencies, non-government organizations that run those types of programs. So, as a libertarian, the first choice is not for the U.S. to fund any type of change agents in foreign countries. But if there's a hierarchy there, paying other countries to kill young men and women, or paying a lot less to Americans to volunteer overseas and try to foster world peace, I think the latter is my preference, right?
Sure, makes sense. So if you have to choose between the two, Peace Corps is better than the military.
Yeah, and again, talking about our role as citizens, as a libertarian, we want to move our society toward individual liberties and natural law, and some of the things that we think allows both freedom to thrive and for individuals to prosper, and ultimately for society to prosper.
Sure.
But I'm the kind of person that likes to work within the system, and we take what the system has, and we try to move it to a better place.
Okay,
right?
Sure.
There are a few libertarians like Thomas Jefferson who just got to the point where they said, okay, we're going to write the Declaration of Independence. We're going to hold these truths to be self-evident, and we're going to divorce ourselves from the government of England. But we may get there in this country, but at all possible, we'd like to work within the structure we've got and make positive changes.
Sure, that's a reasonable approach. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of your campaign and the office you're running for, could you please tell us where you served in the Peace Corps? What country?
Yeah, happy to. I served in a place called Tanzania, and at that time it was one of the Tanzania?
Oh, yeah, I went to Southern Africa. I didn't visit Tanzania, but I visited countries that were right by there.
Oh, yeah, good. So very similar. I've been to South Africa as well, and it's, a lot of the same richness. In fact, ethnic heritage in Africa is the Bantu people came from the north and the east, and the herdsmen came from the west and the north, and they kind of converged in South Africa. So South Africa is a melting pot of multiple cultures,
Yes.
both East and West African. But anyway, Tanzania is one of the 10 poorest countries in the world, and it still struggles. But there were a couple things going on there. One, it was a socialist experiment, right? Julius Nyerere was the leader of the independent country of Tanzania, and they did things like forced villagization and really talked about the socialist ideal. And a lot of that was very well intentioned, but it was extremely disruptive to people, and I think was part of what led to their long-term poverty. So that was a wonderful experience to be able to see that and to work to try to change within that system as well.
Sure.
Another thing, you mentioned South Africa. When I was in Tanzania I think was the only country that had declared war against South Africa. So obviously I wasn't able to travel between the countries back in the time. That was back in the 1980s. But really just a rich experience. Yeah, a rich experience for understanding how the world works. You know, there's what you would like to work, there's what really works, and you try to find success between the two.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like the socialist thing can inform your political views, your libertarianism.
Yeah, probably reinforced them.
Sure.
It's unfortunate. Yeah.
So on this podcast, we've interviewed people who have run for similar positions as you have. Different states have different names for the offices. Some call it comptroller, some call it auditor, some call it treasurer, and some of the functions are similar and some of them are different. So could you please describe to us the auditor position in your state and what its roles and responsibilities are?
Yeah, the auditor position in North Carolina is pretty focused. There is a treasurer who's separate. There is an insurance commissioner who's separate. The auditor is specifically charged with, I'd say, three primary things. One is for a lot of the state institutions, like almost all the state universities and community colleges, the state auditor is like the CPA. They go in there and they review the financial statements, they audit the financial statements, and just make sure that the financial statements accurately reflect the realities of the organization. The second thing, and probably the most important thing the state auditor does, is what's called performance audits. So if the legislature or the local government is administering a program, government program, we want to see if the goals of that program are being met. For example, there was an audit done recently about the school systems during COVID, when they locked down the schools. Were the kids getting an education? And the state auditor went in and looked at 4 school districts and tried to find out what happened to the attendance rate. The data was terrible, and that was one of the findings, right, was that the school systems lost control of the students during that period. But they did a deep dive in one of the school systems, and they were able to assess, based on the records they could access, that truancy went up from like 3% the prior year to 13% during the COVID lockdowns. So that informs the public discussion that we know there was learning lost. We know there were problems with the policies that were implemented at that time frame, and the state auditor was able to come in and put some facts against that and help drive the debate.
Sounds good.
And then there are various types of investigative audits the office does. Most recently, there were some complaints. They do a waste, fraud, and abuse hotline, and they get tips, and they investigated a tip at Fayetteville State University. They found out that 3 people in the communications department at Fayetteville State had made about $600,000 of credit card and purchasing card transactions that weren't authorized. You know, things like first-class tickets, flying to conferences, and paying people for consulting services, but doing it with a credit card or with a purchase card. And, what were those services? So there are situations like that the state auditor will weigh in on and maybe refer for the criminal justice system in the state. So overall, I would say, Andrew, what we're doing is we're trying to set a tone for very sound fiscal management. And as you know, financial management in government, fiscal policy, the runaway inflation, the lack of concern about things like writing off large debts, which really means transferring debts to future taxpayers. I mean, all of those things are extremely unfair and irresponsible in our government. And the auditor's office sets the tone on good financial policy and bringing our government back to center, back to reality, back to a stance from which we can maybe begin to make better decisions and be more fair to the citizens of the state.
Sounds good. And it sounds like your background is a perfect fit for this office because it sounds like you've done things like audits before in the past, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. You're going to make me laugh here because the state auditor should be an accountant. I'm a certified management accountant, and I have been that all my career. I've worked as a CFO and a controller and even a CIO, as Chief Information Officer. So I know how to get at data. I know what an audit looks like. I know how to interpret financial information. I know how to set policies and procedures around that. And the two people I'm running against, the Republican and the Democrat, they're both lawyers.
Oh my!
Right? They might be fine for like attorney general, or a lot of legislators are lawyers. But don't we have enough lawyers in government?
Yeah.
That's why the fiscal is such a mess. It's because you need people with financial judgment and talent to go in there. And the auditor's office is turning into just a political morass. There's a recent scandal there where the last auditor had to resign in disgrace. You've got a political appointee who's the auditor right now. I mean, every person I talk to, you just explain, hey, the auditor should be an accountant. The auditor should be independent in both appearance and in fact. I'm the only one that checks those boxes. People say, obviously, you should be the auditor, right? You said it yourself. Hey, you've got a great background for this office. It's such a wonderful opportunity for a third-party candidate to make a significant impact. And I can tell you more about that, but you get the picture. You understand. It's an obvious, easy vote.
Yes. So it doesn't sound like they have much requirements for that position. Like a lot of places where you run for judge, you have to be a lawyer. But when you run for auditor, they don't require it the same way.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our government.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it sounds like your position would be one that would line up with libertarian ideology. It sounds like you'd have that position no matter how reduced the government would be. So would you kindly explain how you believe your libertarian views and your libertarian beliefs are going to impact the way you conduct this office versus the run-of-the-mill auditor?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's funny, when I was at some event the other day, and on my computer I've got a sticker, libertarian sticker. And so someone saw me working on the computer. They said, you're running for auditor. I said, yeah. They said, that's perfect. A libertarian auditor is perfect. You have not only are you independent, right? The majority of government is run by either Democrats or Republicans. So they're immediately conflicted, right? There's Republicans auditing Republicans, there are Democrats auditing Democrats. That's absurd. So I'm independent to begin with. But beyond that, as a libertarian, I'm very government skeptical, right? I'm going to be equally skeptical to both the Republicans and the Democrats. It's really, not only am I independent, I'm a libertarian. It's just the perfect background for an auditor, at least in state government.
Oh, sure. That sounds good. So you mentioned the rules. I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so the other thing I'm just going to segue to is very interesting. In North Carolina, 38% of the voters are either unaffiliated or third party.
Well, that's
32% are 32% are Democrat and 30% are Republican. So that means by a pretty significant amount, the voters, when they register, they declare themselves as independent. If people will just vote their convictions, if they just look at the auditor and say, look, here's a position where I'm not going to be wasting my vote, I'm not going to be, putting anything at risk. Here's a position where the auditor is the best candidate. A libertarian is a great fit if you want a skeptical person in there. And I'm independent. I want good independent voices in the government. So
Sure.
That's a good fit. Also, there was a survey recently done by Meredith College in North Carolina. It was about 1,000 people are surveyed, and they matched the demographics of the voter rolls, and they asked, do the Republicans and the Democrats, do they do a good job of representing your interests, or is there a need for a third party? And here were the responses. 63% said we need third parties.
Awesome.
22% said, no, the Republicans and the Democrats are fine. And then the rest were, undecided. So really, by a 3-to-1 ratio, voters in North Carolina think that we need a third party. Well, again, a state auditor is way down the ballot. It's a very technocratic position. We've got an outstanding independent candidate here. If you want a third party and you don't vote for Bob Drach, the Libertarian candidate for North Carolina State Auditor, then you are lying. You're lying to yourself and you're lying to the pollsters. But you see that, right?
Yes, that's getting straight at the matter. You're not pulling any punches.
Oh, man. Well, it's very hard to break through. I mean, I appreciate you doing the podcast. I really appreciate everyone who listens to this and is open to new ideas and trying to create change in our society. But it's not that heavy a lift. People, mainstream voters want to see third parties succeed. And this is a golden opportunity. And, certainly I need people to vote for me. I need people to spread the word. I need people to tell their friends, especially in North Carolina, hey, this Bob Drach guy, you must vote for him. And I need you to follow me online or consider a donation to the campaign. I mean, this is how we create political change.
Okay. So where can we do that? Where can people do that? What is your website address? And if you want to share the social media handles, if they're similar, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you. No, the way to follow me, my website is electdrach.org. No spaces, electdrach, DRACH.org. And I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn. They're all versions of that. These are Elect Drach on Twitter, Elect Drach on Facebook. So you can find me. If just go to the website, type in Bob Drach, DRACH, and you will find me. Please do.
All right. And you said that you could use some volunteers?
Yep. In North Carolina, everything from canvassing to, we've got a few fundraisers. We're doing a lot of tabling around the state. I'm trying to identify people in every single county. We have 100 counties in North Carolina. I need a person in every county who will take our campaign signs before the middle of September, and then on the statutory date when we can put up campaign signs, to put them out at all the early voting locations in your state and all the major intersections in your area, and help us distribute signs. So there's lots of roles for volunteers. You can sign up to volunteer, and you can make a donation both on the website. Again, that's electdrach.org.
Perfect. Bob, we thank you for coming on the podcast today and talking about your campaign. We appreciate it.
Yeah, wonderful talking to you. Thanks for what you're doing.
Sure thing. We wish you all the best in your campaign and everything else you do in your personal and professional life.
Have a great day.
Bye now.